Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bob Willis and I'm the Executive Director of Samarco, and today I'll be giving a brief overview and an update on our exploration activities. I'd like to draw your attention to this slide entitled Forward-Looking Statements. There may be forward-looking statements in my comments as well as in the presentation, so I would encourage you all to read it in its entirety. Samarco was generated about 10-11 years ago with founding directors, primarily Tuki Angus and myself. And we spent a number of years exploring in Mexico, and early last year, in 2019, we made a decision that we would change our primary focus for exploration jurisdiction to Canada, and ultimately ended up in British Columbia. In the spring of 2019, our team identified the Buck property as one having most of the key elements for acquisition, which we had identified as something that had some previous exploration, that indicated some reasonable grades, had good infrastructure, had year-round access for exploration, a fairly good permitting process that would be well defined, and potentially a large footprint leading to large-scale opportunities. One of the items in our negotiations with the vendor of the Buck property was that we needed to consolidate our shares on a 3-for-1 basis, and we ultimately did that in September of 2019, resulting in a very tight share structure, 32 million shares outstanding, and a very small market cap, about 6 million Canadian as of today. Wanted to point out on this slide the basic terms of the agreement with the vendor of the Buck property, Dick Billingsley. He also, just by note, was the vendor of the Tatoga property to GT Gold, which probably a lot of you know has resulted in a very successful exploration story. Anyway, Dick and I both recognized that the Buck property really did have potential for some serious exploration opportunities. So I just wanted to show this slide and to show that the deal that we negotiated is, quite modest cash payments on an annual basis over 5 years, and quite heavily weighted on shares of Samarco to the vendor as we go forward. He believes that the property, certainly has an opportunity for serious exploration success. The Buck property at a glance, as we can see, as I mentioned, it's a very large property. 15,000 hectares. It's just south of about a 20-minute drive south of Houston, BC. We have year-round exploration access. And as you can see, it's south of the Golden Triangle by a few kilometers. And also our initial logging of our recent drilling of 1,800 meters has indicated a very robust, highly altered volcanic breccia system. It appears to be open in all directions. And there's a number of exploration opportunities on the property that we have yet to explore. One of the key things that I mentioned a few minutes ago was the strategic location of an exploration opportunity. And again, with the Buck property, it's about a 20-minute drive south of Houston on an all-weather gravel road, accessible year-round. The developed infrastructure nearby with grid power, railway, and major highway. And it's a well-defined permitting process, and we were successful in acquiring our permit over about a 4 to 5 month period last fall, and we received that permit in January of this year. I just wanted to note that the property is located in a mining district. Houston is a resource-based town. It's the Equity Silver Mine, which had about a 20-year mine life, Huckleberry Porphyry Copper Deposit to the southwest, the Daco Moly Mine, and I just want to draw your attention to the Blackwater deposit on this slide, because I'll be referring to it shortly. The Buck property itself currently is about 20 kilometers in the north-south direction, 5 kilometers east-west, and I wanted to show on this slide that not only the area that we currently have put a few holes in, but also the other exploration opportunities that we hope to get to some of this year, if we can. And that really, really bodes well for the property, that not only is the current drilling area very, very prospective, but we think there's others as well. One of the things I would note is that there's about 50 to 60 years of historical exploration on this property by quite a number of different explorers. And as you can imagine, there's been a number of different geologists and different ways that core was logged, for example. There's a lot of geophysical work where we've got a lot of the data, but not all. So we have spent a good part of the last 6 months, and it's still going on to some extent, analyzing all the historical information. So there's been several $1 million of exploration over the last 50 years. We have that data, and we're trying to see if that will help us to vector into some of these additional targets, as well as hone into the expansion of our current drilling area. One of the things that has been a little difficult for us is that there's virtually none of the historical drill core that is available in a form that we can rely on. And so basically all of the areas that there was historical drilling, we do have drill logs. However, as I mentioned, it's difficult at times to understand what was being logged. There's a lot of abbreviations and various descriptions that seem to be somewhat inconsistent. So I guess really what I'm saying here is that we're starting from scratch on the Buck property in our exploration and our drilling, albeit we are using a lot of the historical work to really hone us into some key areas. One of the key things on the Buck property, as you see on this slide, is the large red area, which is currently a current footprint of mineralization at surface. It is open in all directions, and I might note there's the three ovals that I've outlined on this slide. This one to the southwest a little bit is a highly prospective area, and we believe that through our summer exploration that most likely the footprint will expand into this area as well. In our current drilling, just to note, we drilled 3 holes in this area we call the horseshoe zone. Primarily our drilling was to simply get some fresh core and to try and identify what styles of mineralization are carrying the gold, silver, and to some extent the zinc grades. We have noted that there's been at least 3 styles of mineralization in the drill core that we've seen so far. There's quite a disseminated that we think will be the kind of the base grade, if you will. And then we do see some overprinting of veins and veinlets that are mineralized. And we also see highly densely fractured zones where the original rock was very brittle, and they're mineralized as well. So I think once we get our assays in and compiled, that's going to lead us to expand on this current area that we've drilled. And I'd like to note these 2 shorter holes, 3 and 4, were primarily drilled in search of what had been interpreted a fault zone going through this sort of northwest, southeast area. We think that even in the last couple of weeks in our continuing analysis that possibly there's a structural corridor that may be more east-west in this zone. So we will see. These 3 holes were primarily to try and drill into an area that where you can get some fresh core and establish what are the controls for the mineralization. And these 2 holes were simply for looking for a structure in this particular area. I wanted to talk a little bit about what to expect at the Buck property. One of the things that I mentioned a few minutes ago, the Blackwater deposit is located about 100 kilometers to the southwest of the Buck property. We can see that according to the New Gold website that the grades of their reserves, and it's a large volume, large scale type deposit in their feasibility, identified 0.74 grams gold and 5.5 grams of silver. Now the geology and the alteration of Blackwater, according to their feasibility, is very, very similar to what we see at Buck. It's a large scale type system. Now one of the things that I wanted to note was that, you know, we hopefully will find similar type geology and alteration in our drilling. We do see that, and it might be similar grades. And one of the other things I would note is that Victoria Gold, for example, in the Yukon, I think according to their website, albeit it's heap leach, they are mining 0.63 grams per ton gold in their reserves. So I think, you know, as far as the Buck is concerned, what we currently see, it's a large scale type situation, although we do expect that some of the additional exploration targets on the property maybe hold some of the more vein type, high grade type situations. As far as our near term exploration strategy, I think we will continue to plot up the assays as they come in, and we will re-look at the core and visually see, now that we have some core to actually look at, visually see what are the controls for the better grade gold and silver mineralization. And we, you know, again, I think that we will immediately have a summer crew, boots on the ground. We are anticipating that would happen starting in June, about a month from now. And then that can potentially lead into a phase 2 drill program, which we believe that we could get going this fall or late summer, providing that the current restrictions are to a point where we can access the property. Now, having said that, we have currently completed our recent drill program under the very strict guidelines of the COVID-19 provincial health and government guidelines, and our geoscientist team are very, very good at following that. So being that the Buck property is accessible by ground, we don't need air support, whether it's helicopters or commercial airlines to get there. We can drive in vehicles. We can separate part in driving in different vehicles. Same with drilling. We've managed to just finish our drill program under the current guidelines. And of course, the town of Houston is a 20-minute drive away and certainly has a support of everything that would be needed for our next phase of drilling. I think in summary on the Buck property, we certainly see that it has the opportunity to have a very, very large footprint to be expanded. And our next drill program, we expect will be stepping out following the vectoring once we see where the grades of this mineralization is going and what the controls are. So with that, I think I'll wrap up this summary and look forward to chatting again in a very, very short period of time once we get our drill. Thank you very much.